Greetings to all in the name of Jesus Christ. Thank you. For today's meditation, let's look at Luke chapter 7. I'm very sure it's a very familiar passage. Even the Sunday school students are very familiar with the passage, but let's together have a look at the passage once again. Let me read the verse. So there is a centurion's servant whom his master valued highly, was sick and about to die. The centurion heard of Jesus and sent some elders of Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. So, who is a centurion? Centurion is a Roman soldier. He was not a Jew, but a Gentile person. And Jews were not usually very fond of Roman soldiers. So, this was quite strange because it was some elders of Jews who are in very high position in the society who came to Jesus for recommendation for this Roman soldier. And what else can we see? We can see the character of the man. I mean, the man was a compassionate person, as he is using all his resources to get help for his sick servant, which means he was a kind person. When we come down to verse 4, when they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him. This man deserves to have you do this because he loves our nation and has built our synagogue. So we can read that they pleaded earnestly with him, which means it was not for namesake. Rather, they pleaded and they really meant it when they asked Jesus to heal the centurion's servant. And one of the reason is that because they said he loves their people, and the centurion also built a synagogue for them, which was also a bit strange because Roman soldiers were not very fond of Jews either. But what we understand is that he was a man who loved God's people. He was a man who loved God and contributed to God's people. Although he didn't know much about God, obviously he was not a Jew, so he didn't know much about God, but he believed what he heard about Jesus. Thus, he sent the people to Jesus to ask for help. He might have heard about Jesus through his friends, maybe some Jews, because he built the synagogue for them. So, what we understand is that even before his servant was sick, he had already been helping and loving God's people. Now, when we come down, so Jesus went with them. He was not far from the house when Centurion sent friends to say to him, Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. That is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. So the before picture when we read, it could mean that he was a man of rank, and therefore he used all his influences to recommend Jesus. But this line of the centurion shows what kind of man he was. He had a heart filled with humility. He was already informed that Jesus was on his way to his house. So imagine that happening back in the days where there was no mobile phone, where there was no social media. And he was the man of that kind of influence and power. But still he said, Jesus, please, you don't have to come here. What do we understand from that? He accepted his sinfulness, and by that, he accepted God's divine holiness. It's not easy for someone of that kind of position to say that he is not worthy for someone to come to his house. But he admitted and he humbled in front of Jesus. He valued the divinity and holiness of Jesus. When we come down, we see that, but say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes, and that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. Here we see the spectacular statement by the Gentile Roman soldier to Jesus. This means that he understood the authority of Jesus. He realized if he himself had such an influence and authority over his subordinates, and people, how much more will Jesus have upon evil spirit and diseases? That was a big revelation. He believed that the words of Jesus will have the power to heal and distance won't matter. And when we come down to verse 9, when Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him and turned around and said to the crowd that followed him, I say to you, I have not found such great faith, not even in Israel. Bible has the evidence of Jesus being marveled only twice. And one of the occasion is this. Jesus is being marveled at the faith of a centurion. He was not a Jew. He was not a disciple. He had no religious title and he had no spiritual history that we have to boast about. He was a Gentile person. But he believed whatever he heard and he acted upon it. Even before his servant was ill, he loved and served for God's people, which is same as loving God himself. He respected Jesus. He accepted his own sinfulness and God's holiness and believed that Jesus needn't have to come to his house to heal his servant, but his word will do. And not only he believed that, he acted upon it. Even when he knew Jesus was on his way, that imagine that he literally stopped Jesus from coming to his house just because he had great faith in the power of Jesus and his authority. Imagine ourselves in that place. If Jesus was coming to our house, would we stop Jesus from coming? What kind of faith would have that centurion had? He thereby marveled Jesus. I mean, it's impossible to marvel Jesus. Think about it. Because everything in this world was made with one word. And everything in this world was created by God. So there is absolutely nothing that God can marvel at. Even when he made all the oceans, the sea life, the birds of the air, the animals, God said it was good, but he did not marvel. As humans, we might marvel at many things, like we have seven wonders of the world, or if a scientific theory, or even something in the Facebook or in the news. That we may marvel at many things. We are humans, but it is God. He is the creator. He's a sovereign God, and it is not possible for God, the creator, to be marveled. Yet it happened at the faith of a Gentile. Why? Because even his people, the Jews, didn't have a proper idea of his authority and holiness. It was Jews who asked him to go to the centurion's house because the soldier was worthy to be held by Jesus. Even they believed somebody has to be worthy enough so that Jesus could go to their house and uh, do a miracle. We read later that Jesus went to Peter's house and then healed the mother-in-law of Peter. So it was quite common thing for Jesus to be there while miracles happen. Yet this man took a step of faith. The centurion had a deeper understanding and faith for Jesus. We can read in the Bible that even his disciples once asked, don't you care that we are perishing? Even when Jesus was with them, when the storms were there. So God was surprised to see such a kind of faith in an outsider. Faith may be only a size of a mustard seed, but it could move mountains. In my words, it could move God himself. The God who created the world, the God who created everything out of one word, everything out of nothing. Even the kiss of the disciple, his dear disciple Judas, must not have surprised Jesus. It didn't surprise Jesus. But what surprised was the outsider's faith. It was not just a faith, but a faith with act. The servant was healed at that moment, at that instant. But if you read the passage carefully, that's not a miracle at all. It doesn't have much significance in that passage. But what was a miracle was such a revelation of God's ultimate power and sovereignty to an outsider when there were millions of followers for Jesus. What surprised Jesus was such a kind of faith in an outsider. James 2:26 says, for as the body without the spirit is dead, So faith without works is dead also. So we can't say we have faith and not act on it. If we have faith, we should act on it too. Otherwise, it's futile. It's either faith or unbelief. There's no in between, there's no neutral ground. So it's either faith or unbelief. So the servant was healed at that instant. And if we go through the Bible from the Old Testament, there are millions of examples. For example, Abraham was ready to offer his only son when God asked him to do. There was faith as well as acting upon it. The readiness to give up his only son for God showed or proved his faith. So nothing can marvel God, but we can marvel God by our faith. It's like Ezekiel who prophesied looking at the dry bones, like Noah who built an ark when there was no rain ever in the world. Nobody has ever heard about rain before, but yet Noah believed in God and built an ark while everyone around him ridiculed him. Like Elijah who dug a trench around the altar, and not only that, he flooded it with water before praying to God to send a fire from the heaven. Just imagine the kind of faith that man had. I mean, he was praying for the fire to be sent, but yet he dug a trench, filled it with water, but he believed in God. And his faith was such a great faith that I can imagine heaven must have moved by that such kind of faith. That's a true step of faith. Although it's not written in Bible, God must have moved by such acts of men of faith, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. When they were tied, and the furnace was 7 times more fiery, the fiery furnace was 7 times more hotter than normal times. Strong men took them and cast them into the fire. Yet they did not say a word against God. They were young men. They had a whole life ahead of them. They did not say a word against God. And while the king saw 4 men walking in the fire, if you ask the young men, they can say that God was there even before they were thrown into the fire. He was there as a first person because he wouldn't let those young men who stood for his name to be harmed. So they were not scared to give away their life for Christ's sake. That's faith. The act of faith turned the furnace into AC, and while the king saw 4 men walking, God was already there for them. So while it was Centurion's faith that marveled Jesus, there is one more instance in the Bible where Jesus marveled. And it may be surprising to us, but it was at the unbelief of people of Nazareth. While it, on the one hand, it was at the faith of Centurion that Jesus marveled. On the other hand, Jesus marveled at the unbelief of Nazareth. If you read Mark 6:5, we can see, now he could not do mighty work there, except that he laid his hands on few sick people and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief. Why? Because as the people of Nazareth knew him, as long as he was a little boy, they did not respect him or believe in him. They focused on his human side rather than on his divine side. Although they heard his preaching and knew about him, it did not grow as faith, and therefore, even God Himself, the creator of the whole wide universe, could not do any mighty work among them. Let me just repeat that. Even God Himself, the creator of the whole wide universe, who made everything out of nothing, out of one word, couldn't do anything more, just because of the unbelief of the people of Nazareth. So just imagine the power of unbelief. So this all happened because of the familiarity. As familiarity grows, it can produce unbelief, a big unbelief, which means that even God cannot do a miracle if we are praying without faith. If we are praying without faith, even God cannot do anything. Whereas if you have faith, like the woman with the bleeding, even Jesus knew it only after she was healed. I mean, only Jesus knew about it after power left him, which means she became well just because of her faith. And that is the power of faith. While the centurion said, just a word will do, I tell you, even words are not needed if you have faith like a mustard seed. Because we see in the story of the woman with bleeding, only even Jesus only knew that the power was away from him, the power went from him after she was healed. So that is the power of faith. There are many verses where it says that you have to believe for things to happen. If you look on to Matthew chapter 21-22, it says, if you believe, you will receive whatever you ask in prayer. James 1:6 shows, but when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of sea blown and tossed by the wind. We also see the faith of a Gentile woman in Matthew 15:27. Who said, even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from master's table. And what did Jesus say to her? Women, you have great faith. Your request is granted. And her daughter was healed at that moment. So faith can do miracles. It's that faith that made disciples to take nothing for their journey, neither staffs, no bags, no bread, no money, because they had faith. It's that faith some of the amateurs didn't give eggs to their children, but saved that for the pastors. It is that faith some of them resigned their jobs to serve Lord. It is that faith some missionaries gave life, theirs and their family's life, for God. It is that faith some people were ridiculed, although they had everything to be good in the society. They were ridiculed just because of his name. So just let me ask you, let's think what God must be thinking about us. Can we marvel Jesus? If we can marvel Jesus, what category would we be in? Will we be in the category of the centurion whose faith marveled Jesus? Or are we in the category of the people of Nazareth whose unbelief marveled Jesus? Let Nazareth be a warning to us, as familiarity can breed massive unbelief. So God is looking for a generation of faith warriors who will believe in God, which may seem crazy to the world. Just whenever someone take a step of faith, it may seem crazy to others. But he needs more Ezekiels who would prophesy without doubt to the dry bones. He needs more Abrahams who would tie up his only son in the Mount of Moriah. He will need more people like Peter who goes with a fishing rod for the coin. He needs people like Philip who would go to Gaza by hearing the voice. He needs people like Elijah who says to the king that there won't be any rain until he says so. He's looking at such a generation. Are we ready? Are we ready to marvel God by our faith? Let us ask ourselves and submit ourselves to God. Thank you all.